Hello, I'm Kelly O'Connell, attorney and author with Knockout Podcasts. I crave debate on politics, society, history, the arts, religion, and red-hot current dramas. Hang out with me and my intriguing guests while we examine our times. Hear my take and offer me yours. And please don't forget to subscribe. Hey there, Kelly here. Thanks for tuning in. Today's title is Chaos and the Violence of Leftism, the Nihilism of the Elites, or Why Liberals So Easily Embrace Violence. Why is that, huh? Well, you see, Maxine Waters shows up. She flies from LA to Wisconsin, and she gets out there and she says that she wants people to stay in the streets. She wants to encourage them to fight and not give up, and even to ramp it up a little bit. And this is after a year of political violence in all these cities. So you have to ask yourself, was she meaning to cause violence? And my guess is probably. Violence is undoubtedly the oldest attempt at persuasion in the history of Marxism. And if you listen to the stories out of the USSR and China and the incredible bloodshed, and then you think about all the other places that there was Marxism or communism, always violence. Why is that? Well, because they believe in the apocalypse. It's a secular apocalypse. It's not biblical, but they believe that there has to be a violent overthrow of the world, of capitalism, for them to then get to the next place, which is peace, cooperation, and you know what? No property, communism. And they think that they're going to make it by doing that. Anyway, if you don't believe me, here's a clip from Mad Max herself when she was in Wisconsin.
What happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
So anyway, let's get into this just a little bit, the craziness of the violence. If you think of all of the violence out there, well, what's the purpose of it? And I can actually be quite specific. I wrote an article on this, and it was called Why Protesters Will Riot, Perpetual Marxist Violence. And so, first of all, you have to understand that Marxism and what we're dealing with in Antifa and Black Lives Matter and the protest around Derek Chauvin's trial and all this other stuff that's going on, all of the political correctness, it comes out of ideology. It obviously doesn't come out of the Bible, right? And so there's a book that I got, Communism and Political Violence, and it explained what was going on. And so the first thing that the communists do, or the socialists, if you want to call them that, Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi, whatever, is they commit agitation and propaganda. They stir things up. They cause riots. They put out signs. They pamphlet. They put out leaflets. They try to persuade. They try to convert people. And so you get that out there trying to re-educate people, right? And after that, the World Communist Movement has embraced the Russian Revolution. Now, why they would do that, it's because it was the first successful revolution that was pulled off the way that it was, and it became the outline. And Marx, when he was writing Das Kapital, when he was writing Communist Manifesto, he didn't really have answers as much as he had criticisms. It's kind of strange, but so Russian Marxist Bolsheviks were the party that took over Russia back in, say, 1917, around that time. And they were instructed to rally, organize violence, and exercise violence to fight off violence. So at this time, the Tsar was being overthrown, and there was a lot of violence already. And it is true that if they were going to be involved with that, they were probably going to run into violence. But the Bolshevik name means the majority. The Bolshevik reality was, and you're not going to believe this, 5% of 1%. So in a country of about 70 or 80 million people, you had 20,000 individuals who were in the Bolsheviks, and they took over the whole country. And how did they do it? So as the Russian Revolution is becoming a model for all future Marxist conflict, they believe since that thing that happened in Russia took violence, all revolutions would take violence. So they also, when they were putting violence together to overthrow, they blamed the violence on the capitalists who they had claimed had enslaved the population. And so the communists, in response, were called to battle in the streets against the slavery of greed. And when looting occurred, they said it was necessitated by hunger. So we've got the same things today. When these Black Lives Matter people are out there and they're fighting and they're rioting, what was the cause of it? They were fighting against injustice. And the injustice was caused by the establishment. And now, according to all of these theories, it's caused by really the whites in control who have fomented slavery. There was original slavery, and that ended. But now there's other kinds of slavery. There's institutional racism. Now, the Cambridge History of Communists states that the civil war that followed the October Revolution became the first stage of the Bolshevik application of what they call prescriptive terror. Anyone opposed or suspected of being opposed to the revolution was branded as a class enemy and a counter-revolutionary and terrorized. So that was the matrix that this was born in. Now, another element. Since communist violence was a necessity, it was therefore mandatory, so nobody could decline. Nobody who's involved in the communist movement could eschew, could step away from, could avoid, could shrink back from violence. And when the early Marxists referred to this, they talked about the direct, and this is a quote, the direct naked military terror of fascism, referring to the terror of factories met with, quote, rubber truncheons, long knives, and symbols of murder. And here, capitalism, just like it is today, is portrayed as an engine of oppression, terror, and war, which justified the violence against the owners. So now you've got violence against the police department, right? You've got violence against the system. And there was a call there for terror against terror. And so communists organized marches in every city to broadcast their ability to, quote, jointly overthrow the capitalist social order. So even though it's only a group of 20,000 people, they're very organized, they're very disciplined, and they're sending out platoons to every city to impress the government with this idea that they were coming to take over. Now, world communism is the goal, right? Now, when we talk about the New World Order, a lot of people have in their mind that. And it is leadership through these international societies. The authority is the world courts and supranational bodies. So they're fighting, like the people in this country are fighting, to break down the American might so that we can then put all of our efforts, all of the goods, the property, the wealth that we have into the world system. And so they were looking for class war and the quote is, "The armed uprising is a class war, civil war, for the uprising is a relentless war of annihilation with weapons." So they were not afraid to use weapons. And you might say, well, Kelly, there's a lot of innocent people out there that could get hurt. Well, did you know that according to R.J. Rummel, the expert from Hawaii who recently passed away, he did a program in the University of Hawaii that was really a brilliant program, and he had records of all of these government slaughters, and based on the communism's black book and all this, all of the people that were killed by the communists, it's amazing how often they killed unbelievable, countless people. But they think that Stalin killed 74 million. They think Chairman Mao killed 77 million. These are approximations, but they're based on different events. And then Lenin killed tens of millions too before he died. Now, you know, the interesting thing is Lenin was really not that old when he died, and it is said that his brain ossified. It turned to stone, so that when they finally cut him open and they looked at his noggin, they looked at his brain, you'd be able to hit the brain with a knife or a tuning fork and hear it vibrate because it had turned to stone. So, a very odd set of events. So, you've got a group of people who are underdogs in their mind, and obviously in Russia, the communists, before they took over, were a very small group of people, 20,000 people. Imagine 20,000 people active in America trying to take it over. And so they felt like they had no choice, and also the ideology of Marx, the teachings of Marx, the ideas that he put out there were very simplistic, but yet at the same time they were also they were just riveting, I guess. The slave owner and the slaves, the mean boss and the tortured employees, the weak and the strong, the rich and the poor. That was the symbolism that Marx used, and so it really captivated people. And I think the reason today that there's so much talk and thinking of oppression and victimization comes out of the same type of thinking, because that's where these thoughts come from. And this race theory, the one race oppresses the other race. There's no sense that the races could naturally get along. So the Cambridge History of Communism again said terror and violence are endemic to dictatorships. In the history of political violence, the Soviet practice marked a new political violence that was ideologically justified and exercised by the first communist state in the world history. Backed by Moscow, communists everywhere also resorted to violence as a political weapon. At the root of communist violence was ideology predicated on the theory of class struggle as the driving force of history. No Soviet leaders refrained from advocating the use of terror against class enemies. Okay, so that should tell you right there everything that you need to know. Even though communism often presents itself as peaceful and pacifistic, as it has done that in the past, it is actually ruthless when it gets full power. And you remember there was testimony from the people that had been around Barack Obama and this guy Bill Ayers, and they had talked at some point that if the United States was taken over in a communist coup, there would have to be, and this is a number of years ago, but there would have to be something like 25 million people sent to re-education camps or prison camps. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's incredible. And that also should tell you that communism is against human nature. And why is it against human nature? It is because we are all self-interested, and we are designed to be self-interested because we are all at extreme peril in this world if we don't pay attention, if we don't get organized, if we don't work, if we don't get a profession, any of us could starve. And especially in days past, there was a lot of starvation. There was a lot of poverty. There was much malnutrition and such. And so we are designed. Now, if you're an evolutionist, of course, you think that it was evolution that designed us. But if you believe that we were designed by a higher power to be self-interested, and we are trying to survive, and we plan ahead, and we see that there is the youth when there's a lot of energy and idealism, and then there's the time to get married and have a family, and then there's old age. And we as human beings, unlike animals, try to plan for the old age. So we work and we're self-interested. We are not designed to be selfless and giving up everything, because if we do that, then we're not taking care of ourselves and our responsibilities. So communism is opposed to human nature. It is opposed to common sense. And when I say communism, though, although this whole thing is a conversation of the history of communism, this is the background of these people that have taken control to a great degree of the United States. And it is fascinating, and it is also sad to look out there and see how much damage has been done. Think about the border. Think about all the businesses damaged during the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa protests. And also think about how the economy is ground to a halt. Now, you can see COVID as being an act of God or an act of nature, right? And that human beings just reacted to it as their only choice that we had was to do shutdowns and wear masks and stuff. But a lot of people, including myself, see it as a lot more nefarious than that. It's been proven that to a large extent, shutdowns don't work. And the reason I say they don't work is because the most shut down states, New York, Michigan, California, had some of the worst numbers. And states that never really bought into the shutdown, Florida, have good numbers. So, and a lot of old people. So you can't really blame the disease on a lack of masks in these particular places and shutdowns. But what the government has done is to use the control of the economy and the shutdowns, in which the governors casually ruined businesses and didn't care. None of them seem to care. You've got Cuomo, who is actually sending people back into rest homes that are sick, which made sure that 15 or 20,000 more elderly would die that way. But he wasn't worried about the shutdowns, and neither was the mayor of New York City. And Gretchen Whitmer, she wasn't worried. She did the same thing, the same crazy decision. The most ill-advised decision was to send these sick old people into another group of old people, because we understand that it's the old that are really vulnerable, old and the sick. So in California, just one wretched example after another of decision making. But then you've got the hypocrisy. Every single one of these governors went out to their own private parties and wasn't wearing masks. And Newsom did this in California in the French restaurant in the Simi Valley or in Napa, one of the finest restaurants in America. He could go out and have dinner because he was the governor, and now they're trying to pull him out of office. They got a recall going. Cuomo and Whitmer, they're all in trouble politically because they fell in with the party. They attacked Trump. They insulted him. They made this, the Democratic Party made this big deal about being as rude and as ruthless to Trump as possible, and it's really backfired on him. And do you think Trump is going to run again? Well, hold that thought, and I want to just throw this idea out to you that we've got to be prepared for violence, but there's a reason for it. And if you picked the brain of a person who was really steeped in communism, the people that influenced the Nancy Pelosi's, and the individuals who thought that the riots and the burning and the physical attacks and the murders of people were a defensible part of protesting, those people got those ideas from somebody, and where they got them from was this very well established theory of communism. And it's scary and it's sad, and if you believe that, and I certainly do based on evidence, they're not afraid to harm other people. They're not afraid to kill other people. It's out there. It's this idea that the society has to be overthrown. And it is just not, it's not just scary, it is also deeply disturbing. And it's something that all of us should be educated on. And so when you hear Maxine Waters getting up and saying, if you see Trump people, you get out and you surround them and you let them know you're not welcome here. I mean, frankly, who the hell is Nancy Pelosi to tell anybody to inform somebody else that they're not welcome somewhere? She is a local politician in California, in Watts, and she doesn't live there. She lives in a $6 million mansion that's outside of Watts. But she is a local politician with a national meeting in a national setting in D.C. But these representatives like Nancy Pelosi, like Maxine Waters, they're supposed to be worried about their constituents. And you look at L.A. and the terrible, terrible homeless problem and the problem with disease, and there is feces and needles that are spread all over, and a lot of crime in L.A. and San Francisco. And these two idiot representatives, Mad Max and Nancy Pelosi, who's so full of it, and they're not doing anything to stop the homelessness. They don't care. They're the ones that are clapping when these George Soros DAs come in and say, we're not going to enforce quality of life crimes. Why? Because it's supposed to be oppressive to the poor. Well, Manhattan just decided we're not going to prosecute prostitutes anymore, so prostitution is going to explode. And a lot of people who get caught up in prostitution are victims themselves of sexual abuse, physical abuse in their childhood or growing up, or they've somehow gotten pushed off the reservation and they're on the fringe. And what is the state doing to help them? I mean, just letting them go. So it's just it's really crazy out there. And to illustrate my point, the real issue is this lack of humanity, even though the left claims to be the only ones that care about the poor and the downtrodden and everything. Do you think that the left cares about all these people that are coming over the border, all the kids without the parents, all the kids that are getting raped and beaten and killed, and all the disease that they're around and everything? Did it ever occur to you that they're just props in this morality play by the left? Well, let me tell you a story. After the communists took over, there was developed, and they were, I'm sure, already out there to some extent, but there was the Gulag, and that was this constellation of prison camps. And for any reason, you could get sent to these prison camps, and they were terrible. And so one of them was called Kolyma, and it was famous for being in one of the most inhospitable places on earth. And people who were sent there were political prisoners mostly, and I think the life expectation there was something like 9 months. And there is this incredible series of stories called the Kolyma Tales that you could pick up either on, you get them on Amazon or whatever. But there are stories out there about these people that live there and the incredible cold and how easy it was to die. And the work they were doing was they were mining. There's a lot of gold up in the Kolyma section, which is far into Siberia. And there's a Kolyma River. There's a mountain range up there. The regions that it covers, Magadan region and the Chuktoka Autonomous Region. And they had to do things like build roads, do things where it was so cold it was like 70 below. And there was also uranium up there, tin and uranium. And so without any protective clothing, these people went out and dug for the uranium. Of course, they died quite easily from that between the cold and the uranium and everything. So really, just truly awful. And there was stories of they would occasionally send ships of women up there, women prisoners, and they would get up there and they would bring them in, and basically the guards would allow the men to have the women, and they would be raped until dead. If you can imagine that. And so you see that the viewpoint of communism, because it doesn't have any belief in God, it doesn't have any, humanity in it. It was a society that was set up so that people would turn on each other and report each other for crimes against the state, because the state was all-powerful, and the leadership, the Stalins, the Lenins, were gods, and their pictures were everywhere, and they had the power of a god. And so there was no milk of human kindness. And I'm certain there was some Christianity up there that was shared in Solzhenitsyn, who was in the Gulag. He wrote the famous book, The Gulag Archipelago. He was saved. There were saved people up there. But the entire society was built so that it would feed on one another. And that's what I see happening in America today. Court systems in Russia, just like we have court systems and courts of appeal. In the history of the USSR, how many cases were overturned on appeal? 0. Think about that. The entire system of the government was set up to take advantage of and take away the rights of human beings. And they didn't get anywhere by it, because while they're having their freedom taken away and they're preying on one another, they're ratting each other out to the government, and people are disappearing who never return again. In America, we were building up the country. We were building national highways, and we were building commerce and agriculture and everything wonderful, because we had freedom. In Russia, they didn't have any of that, and they were killing each other, or the government was killing them. So I only bring this up because I want you to think about the fact that as we lose our rights, as cancel culture comes along and we don't have any due process, as the government gets to the place where it can take people out, it can go after even a sitting president, and nothing happens to the people, we are in danger of losing our way of life. Free speech is gone. Due process is gone. One group of people or groups of people are being set up, the white race or whatever is being put down. None of it adds up to America. That's not who we are. We started in freedom. We were bred in freedom. And that's what we stand for. Anyway, just a short show today. Hope you're well. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to try to keep the shows relatively short and do one every day so you have enough time to listen to it while you're attending to your other activities. But be mindful of what's going on around you, and to the extent that you can, I'm going to challenge you to reach out and find like-minded souls, and don't be afraid to challenge people's ideas, because if we don't start doing that, it's going to be too late, and we're going to be in our own miniature USSR, where the government is the only one that has power. The politicians only have power, and don't forget, they're taking out all the conservatives from the military. They've now persuaded CEOs of giant corporations to attack us, the people that are not leftists. They have taken over the idea of what children are going to be taught, and now they're being taught race theory. And they're being polluted. And if you don't know how to think for yourself, if you can't pick through information that you're given and try to put it together and make a story out of it, make it comprehensible, then you're a slave. You're a mental slave. So let's commit ourselves to helping one another, seeing the best in each other, not being woke, and praying for one another. And we are going to somehow dodge the bullet on this. Have a great day. Kelly O'Connell. Ciao. Well, thanks for listening in. Tune in tomorrow for a new podcast on a sizzling topic, or download one of my classics. Be blessed. Catch you soon, Kelly and the gang at Knockout Podcast.